No one saw this coming. On the biggest political stage, Rachel Reeves snapped. The calm, careful Chancellor, known for her composure under pressure, erupted in fury after a brutal and very public betrayal by Keir Starmer. This wasn't a quiet disagreement behind closed doors. This wasn't polite political tension. This was an all-out explosion, a raw, unfiltered moment that tore apart Labour's carefully constructed image of unity. Reeves didn't just disagree with Starmer, she destroyed him live on air, exposing the shocking truth behind a £57 billion disaster that could crush Britain's economy. Starmer, once seen as the master of discipline and control, revealed his true face, a desperate man throwing his own Chancellor under the bus to save himself. But Reeves wasn't going down quietly. What she said shook Westminster to its core, and this moment could change the future of British politics forever. It all began as a routine press conference, a staged event designed to reassure the public and the markets. Keir Starmer stood at the podium, his usual polished tone promising confidence and stability. Beside him stood Rachel Reeves, expected to nod politely, smile calmly, and confirm his words. But what happened next left everyone stunned. Without warning, Starmer turned on Reeves, laying the full blame for the shocking £57 billion black hole in the government's budget squarely at her feet. The room fell silent. Journalists gasped. The betrayal was cold, calculated, and delivered without mercy. This was not just about policy differences or fiscal debates. This was a public execution of his own Chancellor, broadcast for the entire country to see. Reeves's face froze for a moment, her eyes narrowing as the weight of the accusation hit her. Starmer claimed that she had mismanaged the economy, that her handling of Labour's spending had led to the devastating deficit threatening Britain's future. But those close to the heart of government knew the truth, and so did Rachel Reeves. This wasn't her failure, it was the inevitable result of Starmer's reckless promises, of pledges made to win votes with no regard for the staggering costs they would bring. Climate schemes, defence expansions, trade deals, grand visions that drained the Treasury while Reeves was left struggling to balance the books behind the scenes. And now here he was, making her the scapegoat for the economic mess he had helped create. For a moment, it seemed Reeves might hold her tongue. The cameras were live, the world was watching, but then the dam broke. In a stunning burst of fury, rarely seen in British politics, Reeves lashed out, not with empty anger, but with cold, cutting truth. She laid bare the backroom struggles that the public was never meant to see. She told the nation how Starmer had insisted on spending pledges she knew the country couldn't afford. How he'd forced impossible targets onto her, knowing full well they would fail. How every warning she had given him was brushed aside for the sake of political gain. Her voice trembled with rage, but her words were sharp, precise, undeniable. "You told me to make it work, Keir," she said, glaring at him across the stage. "You pushed for these numbers. You promised the public things we couldn't afford, and now when the truth comes out, you want to blame me. Not this time." The audience sat in stunned silence. Journalists scribbled furiously. Behind the scenes, Labour insiders exchanged horrified glances. This wasn't just the Chancellor disagreeing with her leader. This was open rebellion, civil war in the heart of the Labour Party, and the damage was immediate. Markets, already nervous over the deficit reports, dipped further as news of the confrontation spread. Political commentators on every channel struggled to process what they were seeing. Labour's image of unity, the foundation of Starmer's appeal, was shattered, and Rachel Reeves, once seen as a loyal second-in-command, was now the face of defiance. The tension that had simmered for months within Labour's leadership finally burst into the open, and there was no putting it back in the bottle. But what made this betrayal so shocking wasn't just the public nature of Starmer's accusation, it was the sheer desperation behind it. Faced with collapsing trust, economic turmoil, and growing voter anger, Starmer had gambled everything on throwing Reeves to the wolves. He hoped to save himself by blaming her for the £57 billion disaster. But instead, he provoked the one thing he couldn't control, Rachel Reeves's wrath. And as her furious words echoed across the country, it became clear that this fight was far from over. Reeves didn't stop with accusations. She laid out the full picture for the public. The reckless spending plans Starmer insisted on, the ignored warnings from economic advisors, the secret meetings where reality was buried beneath political ambition. She revealed the promises made to foreign investors that cost British jobs, the defence deals signed not for security, but for headlines, the environmental policies rushed through without care for cost or consequence. Every detail was a fresh wound in Labour's credibility. Each truth was more damaging than the last, and the public listened. Social media exploded with clips of Reeves's outburst. Hashtags trended worldwide. Commentators called it the most devastating political confrontation in decades. Labour voters felt betrayed, not just by Starmer, but by a leadership that had lied about the cost of its promises. Reeves, once a quiet figure in the background, had become a lightning rod for anger and frustration. And Starmer, his reputation as the steady hand of Labour, lay in ruins, replaced by the image of a leader willing to sacrifice his own allies to cling to power. As the press conference stumbled to a close, the damage was done. Reeves walked off the stage without looking back. Her message delivered, her fury spent, but the impact of her rebellion was only just beginning to unfold. Inside Labour, panic spread. MPs whispered of plots, of challenges to Starmer's leadership, of the end of unity. Outside, voters questioned everything they'd been told about Labour's plans for the economy. And at the centre of it all stood Rachel Reeves, no longer the loyal Chancellor, but the woman who dared to speak the truth, no matter the cost. This eruption marked the beginning of a political earthquake, one that would shake Westminster for weeks, months, perhaps even years to come. The £57 billion black hole in the budget was no longer just a number on paper. It was the symbol of a party in crisis, torn apart by ambition, betrayal, and bitter truth. And as the dust settled on that disastrous press conference, one thing was certain: Labour would never be the same again. As the aftermath of that brutal confrontation unfolded, the entire political landscape began to tremble. The shockwaves from Rachel Reeves' live explosion didn't stop at Westminster. They spread like wildfire across the nation. News channels cut away from regular programming to broadcast endless replays of the moment Reeves turned on Starmer. Political analysts, stunned into rare honesty, admitted that they had never seen such open warfare between a party leader and his own Chancellor in modern British politics. The markets were already sliding when the press conference ended, but by the following morning, the pound was down sharply against the dollar and the euro. International investors, sensing chaos at the heart of the British government, began to pull out, and the economic damage Starmer thought he could cover up was suddenly laid bare for all to see. But the most dangerous fallout was happening inside Labour itself. Within hours of the public clash, angry phone calls buzzed between senior members of Parliament, shadow cabinet members, and party organisers. The great secret that had simmered behind Labour's public face for months had finally exploded into view. The rift between Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves was no longer private. It was now the defining crisis of the party. Furious briefings spilled out from both camps to hungry journalists. Starmer's allies insisted that Reeves had lost control of the budget, that she had promised growth forecasts she couldn't deliver, and that the £57 billion shortfall was the price of her failure to rein in spending. But Reeves' supporters fought back hard, revealing details of secret meetings where Starmer himself had demanded impossible spending commitments to win over Green lobbyists, defence contractors, and foreign investors. One insider, speaking anonymously to the press, summed up the chaos. This wasn't a budget disaster, it was a leadership disaster. Starmer knew what he was asking Rachel to do. She warned him again and again. He ignored her, and now he's trying to pin the blame on her to save his own skin. It's shameful. These words hit like a grenade in the media, sparking fresh headlines and fueling the narrative that Labour was collapsing from within. The story was no longer just about a financial scandal, it was about betrayal, broken trust, and the ruthless politics of survival. Rachel Reeves herself vanished from public view after the press conference, refusing interviews, avoiding cameras. But the damage to Starmer's authority was done. Whispers of a leadership challenge spread like wildfire. Senior MPs, once loyal and silent, began questioning Starmer's future. "We can't go into the election like this," one shadow minister reportedly said. "The public won't forgive us for a £57 billion black hole or for tearing each other apart on live TV. Others suggested that Reeves, if she wanted, could rally enough support to oust Starmer and take his place. After all, she had just shown the country that she wasn't afraid to stand up and speak the truth, no matter the cost. Outside the Westminster bubble, public anger boiled over. Labour's carefully built image as the party of fiscal responsibility and economic competence lay in ruins. Voters took to social media to vent their fury, demanding answers. How had this £57 billion disaster been hidden? Why were they only learning the truth now? And why had Starmer tried to bury the scandal by sacrificing Reeves instead of owning up to his own failures? Polling companies rushed to capture the public mood, and the results were disastrous for Labour. Support for the party plummeted overnight. A survey by one major firm revealed that 68% of voters now believed Starmer could not be trusted on the economy. Even worse, 54% thought Rachel Reeves was telling the truth and that she had been betrayed. The Conservatives, sensing blood in the water, wasted no time. Ministers lined up to accuse Starmer of dishonesty, recklessness and weakness. The Prime Minister himself mocked the Labour leader in Parliament, reading out Reeves's own words from the press conference as proof that Labour's economic plans were a fantasy built on lies. If the Chancellor doesn't trust the leader of the opposition, he sneered, why should the British people? The jab landed hard, and Labour's benches sat in uncomfortable silence. Behind the scenes, Tory strategists rubbed their hands in glee. The election that once seemed to favour Labour now hung in the balance, the outcome more uncertain than ever. But perhaps the most shocking development came late that night when a leaked memo surfaced in the press, an internal Labour Party document written just weeks before the scandal broke. In it, senior advisers warned Starmer that his spending pledges were unsustainable, that the budget hole was growing, and that Reeves would be forced to choose between raising taxes or slashing public services. The Chancellor cannot deliver these commitments without unacceptable fiscal risk, the memo read. And yet Starmer had pressed on, making promises the country could not afford, while planning, it seemed, to blame Reeves when the truth inevitably came out. The revelation confirmed everything Reeves had said and made Starmer's betrayal look even worse. Commentators called it the final nail in the coffin of his credibility. He gambled with the country's future, wrote one columnist, and when the bill came due, he tried to dump the cost on Rachel Reeves. Now he's paying the price. Even normally sympathetic voices in the media turned against him, warning that his leadership was doomed unless he could somehow undo the damage. But how? Reeves was silent, her intentions unclear. Was she planning to resign, to challenge him for the leadership, or to let him twist in the wind while the party crumbled around him? Inside Labour HQ, panic set in. Emergency meetings ran late into the night. Polling experts delivered grim forecasts. Party strategists struggled to contain the fallout. And all the while the public watched, disgusted by the spectacle of a party tearing itself apart over money and power. The £57 billion black hole was more than just an economic scandal. It had become the symbol of Labour's deepest failure, the collapse of trust, unity, and leadership at the very top. As dawn broke over Westminster the following day, the political tension that had erupted the night before refused to settle. Inside Parliament, the air was thick with unease, suspicion, and fear. Labour MPs arrived looking tired, tense, and uncertain, whispering in corners, avoiding eye contact, and checking their phones obsessively for the latest updates. Every rumour, every leak, every word spoken behind closed doors now carried life or death weight for the party's survival. And the one question hanging over everyone's head was chillingly clear. What would Rachel Reeves do next? For years, Reeves had played the loyal second in command, the quiet Chancellor who kept Labour's economic credibility afloat while Starmer made the big public promises. But after the brutal betrayal on live TV, something had clearly snapped. Insiders reported that Reeves had refused calls from Starmer and his team all night. She had switched off her phone, locked her office door, and vanished from the official schedule. This was no accident. This was a calculated silence, a threat. The Chancellor, once thought to be Starmer's greatest asset, now held the power to destroy him completely, and the fear in Starmer's camp was real. Some aides even warned that Reeves was preparing a resignation letter, one that would publicly accuse the Labour leader of misleading Parliament, lying to the public, and sabotaging his own economic plan. A resignation like that would not just ruin Starmer, it could collapse the entire Labour leadership and spark a full-blown civil war inside the party. Starmer's closest allies scrambled to prevent disaster, sending messages, offering meetings, promising concessions, but Reeves gave no reply. Meanwhile, the media circus outside was reaching fever pitch. Journalists camped outside Reeves's home, desperate for a comment. TV anchors speculated wildly about her next move. Opinion pages filled with blistering attacks on Starmer's credibility. Even foreign outlets picked up the story, framing it as the collapse of Britain's main opposition party just months before a critical election. And the public was furious. Furious that they had been misled about the economy. Furious that Labour, the party that promised competence, was now trapped in open warfare between its two top figures. Social media exploded with anger, memes, and mockery. Hashtags like #StarmerBetrayal and #ReevesRevenge trended for hours. But inside Labour HQ, panic turned to terror when a second leak hit the press. This time, it wasn't about budgets or spending pledges, it was about the private war between Starmer and Reeves. A secret paper trail showing months of bitter disagreements, warnings ignored, and policy disputes covered up for the sake of party unity. Emails, memos, transcripts, all now public, all damning. Reeves had told Starmer in writing that his £57 billion promises were reckless, unsustainable, and dishonest. Starmer had brushed her off, ordering her to find creative ways to make the numbers work. The public must not know the true cost, one email chillingly read. The scandal deepened. Commentators erupted. This is not just economic incompetence, one headline thundered. This is deception at the highest level. Another described Starmer's behaviour as the worst betrayal of a Chancellor by a leader in modern British political history. Across every news network, every political panel, the verdict was the same. Keir Starmer's leadership was finished. But where was Reeves? The silence couldn't last forever, and when it finally broke, it sent shockwaves through the entire country. At precisely noon, Reeves stepped before the cameras outside the Treasury. Her face was calm but cold, her voice steady but deadly, and her message was devastating. I warned the leader of the opposition that his plans could not be delivered without risking the British economy. I warned him that the £57 billion shortfall would have to be covered by tax rises or by cuts to public services. He ignored those warnings. He insisted the public could be misled until after the election. I refused, and when I refused, he betrayed me. Silence fell. For a moment, it seemed like the entire country was holding its breath. Then Reeves dropped the final bombshell. I can no longer serve in a shadow cabinet led by a man who will not tell the truth. Therefore, I am resigning as Shadow Chancellor, effective immediately. The press exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed, but Reeves turned and walked away, leaving chaos in her wake. Within minutes, the resignation letter was published online, stark, brutal, and unflinching in its accusations. She laid the blame for the £57 billion disaster squarely at Starmer's feet. She accused him of dishonesty, manipulation, and leadership failure. And she warned the country, the Labour Party cannot win the trust of the British people while these deceptions remain unpunished. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. Labour MPs flooded social media with messages of shock, grief, and rage. Some backed Reeves openly, demanding a change in leadership. Others called for unity, but their words rang hollow. The shadow cabinet splintered, resignations loomed, polls plunged further, and Starmer was trapped, silent, isolated, cornered by his own mistakes. Even inside Number 10, government aides reportedly cheered. We couldn't have planned this better ourselves, one Tory strategist smirked to the press. The Prime Minister called an emergency cabinet meeting, warning ministers that Labour's implosion meant the election map had shifted overnight. We may win seats we never dreamed of taking, he told them grimly. As the dust settled from Reeves's political grenade, one truth became clear to all. This was no ordinary scandal. This was a leadership crisis that threatened to tear Labour apart from the inside. A war for the soul of the party, and the outcome, whether Reeves would rise or Starmer would fall, was still terrifyingly uncertain. But just when it seemed like the storm couldn't get any worse for Keir Starmer, fresh revelations surfaced, and these were the final nails in the coffin. Late that evening, more confidential documents mysteriously appeared in the hands of journalists. This time, they weren't internal Labour files, they were Treasury projections, numbers that Rachel Reeves herself had prepared months earlier. These documents confirmed in brutal black and white what Reeves had said publicly. Starmer's economic plans would leave a £57 billion black hole. And even more shocking, there were notes in the margins showing that Starmer knew this. He had seen these figures. He had ignored them. The headlines blazed with fury. Starmer knew the truth and lied, one screamed. Another read simply, Reeves was right. The British public, already boiling with anger, now felt utterly betrayed. Social media exploded again. This time calling not just for Starmer's resignation, but for a full party inquiry. Hashtags like #Starmer must go and #Reeves for leader trended at number 1 for hours. Even Labour's own MPs couldn't hold back. Senior figures broke their silence, openly turning on Starmer. One former minister blasted him on live TV. He's lost the trust of the country, and he's lost the trust of this party. He cannot lead us into the next election. Another warned, if he doesn't resign, the party will remove him. There's no way back. The shadow cabinet began to fracture. Secret meetings were held. Deals discussed. Would Reeves take over? Could someone else rise from the wreckage? Nobody knew for sure. But what everyone did know, what the entire nation now saw, was that Starmer's leadership was hanging by the thinnest thread. And where was Rachel Reeves? Watching, waiting, calm and silent, like the eye of the storm she had unleashed. Sources close to her hinted that she was being courted by powerful factions in the party, urged to step up to lead Labour out of the chaos and into a new future. But Reeves made no promises. She had done the damage. She had dropped the bomb. Now the party had to decide whether to survive or burn. Meanwhile, inside Starmer's private office, all was darkness and despair. Advisors pleaded with him to fight on, to issue an apology, to reshuffle the cabinet, to offer new promises, but it was too late. The public no longer believed him, his MPs no longer trusted him, even his closest allies were jumping ship. One insider described the mood. "It's over. He's finished. We're just waiting for him to accept it." Outside in the cold streets of Westminster, the media circus grew wilder. Protesters gathered with signs reading, "Stop the lies and save our economy." Cameras rolled non-stop. Every journalist in the country was asking the same question: when would Starmer resign? And if he did, would Rachel Reeves take his place? As the final hours of the day slipped by, the sense of political doom was complete. Labour, once strong and confident, was now shattered, broken by its own leader's betrayal and its Chancellor's revenge. The £57 billion scandal had not just exposed lies, it had detonated a war inside the party that might never heal, and the fallout was far from over. What happens next is anyone's guess. Will Starmer cling to power for a few more agonising days, or will he bow to the unstoppable force that Rachel Reeves has become? Will Labour split in two or find a way to rise from the ashes? One thing is certain, British politics will never be the same again. Share your thoughts in the comments section and subscribe to our channel for more UK news. Thank you.